an acre of Ahiflower. It is the equivalent of what would have been how many hundreds of thousands of anchovies or fish?
500,000. 40% of everything that gets caught in a net is not what we intended to catch. It's bycatch, it's turtles, it's whales, it's dolphins, and they get discarded as dead, lifeless creatures. What we did find is that Ahiflower will convert through to these sort of longer chain omega-3s about 400% more effectively than flaxseed oil or chia seed oil. They regulate hormones, they regulate our gut microbiome, they're in our brain, they're in our cardiovascular system. I mean, we should be mindful of reducing the use of industrial seed oils. And I agree with that. There wasn't a differentiation between industrial seed oils and other seed oils.
And most consumers at this point understand inflammation, bad. Anti-inflammation, good.
Inflammation is an essential part of our healing process.
Well, Andrew, thank you for joining the Gut Check podcast. An old friend of our company's and of mine personally. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Caroline, lovely to see you again, and great to catch up. I've been really looking forward to hearing what's going on in your world and sharing what's going on in our world. So thank you for the invitation.
Maybe just to start with your background, you are a very interesting entrepreneur, business owner, and would love to hear just about how you got started.
Oh dear, well, I hope I'm not going to disappoint you with my story. So I'm a Brit originally, and I'm an agricultural scientist, I guess, by training. And my real passion is about growing stuff and working with farmers and putting my hands in the dirt and growing stuff that has positive health outcomes for people and the planet. So what that really means is it's growing stuff using the lightest footprint on the planet possible, so very little inputs, and stuff that is as nutrient dense as it can possibly be. So providing health and wellness benefits. And my business is about doing it for specialty crops that we grow with farmers around the world and end up in wonderful dietary supplements like Nora is. But I'm equally as passionate about doing it with things like community gardens and stuff like that, where we're bringing people together and we're educating, we're spreading the word about how important food production is at the base of the food pyramid. Not just how important it is, but how important it is to do it properly and to share that with people and that sort of thing. And I know we'll come on to that in more detail,
Yeah.
but that's kind of my background, and I've been doing that for, gosh, nearly 40 years.
Let's dive into Ahiflower, because this has obviously been something that you've spent now probably well over a decade, I'd imagine, working on. Is it true? Is it accurate to say that you invented or discovered this particular crop?
There's a modicum of truth to it, Caroline. So back in the day when I was working in the UK, the company I ran there was looking for plant-derived ingredients that sort of met certain criteria. And for me, those criteria were, first of all, were they scientifically backed? Did they actually have sort of scientific credentials behind them? Could farmers grow them? Could farmers grow them without using a lot of synthetic inputs? Do they benefit the environment, like pollinators and topsoil building and carbon sequestration, all the things that we're concerned about now, we were thinking about 20, 30 years ago when we were doing this. And I was very fortunate. A great friend of mine and who became a mentor of mine was really sort of preeminent in the world of looking for plants that had therapeutic benefits. And he was the co-inventor of that wonderful story called Lorenzo's oil. And many of you may be familiar, your listeners will be familiar with the story of Lorenzo's oil. Great story. Well, he was the co-inventor. And whilst he was looking for plant seed oils that helped in sort of disease amelioration, not curing, but disease symptoms amelioration, he said, well, while you're at it, Andrew, see if you can find a plant that contains omega-3s to the similar level or more higher level than fish oil. And at the time, the only thing that was really in the plant kingdom that was being consumed as a source of omega-3 was flaxseed oil, or linseed oil, as we call it in the UK. So we went out and we engaged the services of a rare breed of human beings called ethnobotanists. And ethnobotanists are like they're like the Indiana Jones of the plant kingdom. They go around the world looking for cool plants that do stuff. And we found this species. So we didn't, I mean, I suppose we discovered it to a certain extent, but there's a species that, well, there's a family of plants that are known to have very high levels of omega-3. And they include, the Latin name is Lithospermum. So we looked for plants within that family and we selected them from around the world, countries like Armenia and the Stans and Canada and Europe and Asia. And we brought them back and we grew them. And to our surprise, one particular species within that had such a high level of omega-3, like the highest naturally occurring level of omega-3. And it also was local to the UK. It was actually, it's found globally, but it's also a wild pasture flower. And we looked at that and thought, gosh, this is brilliant. This is the richest source of omega-3 that we've found. And not only did it have omega-3s, it had a different type of omega-3, which is the closest thing that the plant can produce to fish oil, much easier, more easily metabolized and much more efficiently converted to these long chain omega-3s called EPA and DHA, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We did discover it and we thought, gosh, wouldn't this be great if we could cultivate it and commercialize it? But we reached this really big snag. And one of the golden rules of being involved in crop production is that you try to reap more than you sow. And we very soon realized that we were sowing more than we reaped, and we were planting 10 kilos of seed per hectare, and we were harvesting 5. So that would be a quick path to financial ruin. So we worked with a group of farmers, and we said, look, this is a wonderful, wonderful plant for many reasons, biodiversity, very low inputs, etc. But also it has this phenomenal portfolio of essential fatty acids, but we can't figure out how to grow it. Can you help us? So that's really where we did the heavy lifting and the farmers did the heavy lifting. We learned its peculiarities, how to grow it, how it needs nutrition, micronutrition, when to plant it, when to harvest it, etc. So scroll forward a mere 20 years, and we now have commercial crops of Ahiflower that are producing as much omega-3 oil as about 500,000 anchovies per acre. And
Wow.
we've conducted a lot of research, safety, regulatory approvals, etc. So I would love to take a little bit of credit for being for discovering it, but I really, it was there in nature. All we did is kind of look at it and thought, could we domesticate this? Could we actually sort of unleash its potential for the consumer?
For those of you that don't know, the very important part of this conversation is that we use Ahiflower in all of our capsule products. And so we use Ahiflower as a way to actually deliver our probiotics. And we've run a study around the fact that this Ahiflower, this omega, helps us deliver twice as many viable cells through complete digestion. In addition to that, we also get all of the amazing anti-inflammatory benefits and all of the amazing benefits of this oil. So that's what brings Andrew and I together. When you harvest an acre, right, of Ahiflower, of this plant, it is the equivalent of what would have been how many hundreds of thousands of anchovies or fish?
500,000, 500,000 anchovies of fish or fish equivalent. And what makes it so good is that, fish oil production, fish oil, I have nothing against fish oil. It's a
Yeah,
wonderful product, but of course it raises questions of sustainability and accessibility.
right.
But the other thing is that it's a very low conversion rate of efficiency. A metric ton of fish oil only yields about 1% oil.
Mm-hmm.
And we're yielding over 20% oil from our crops. So it's
Right.
just a more efficient way of producing an omega-rich ingredient that can then go on to other applications.
Not to mention, fish, when you kill them, unfortunately, are one and done. Whereas Ahiflower is the exact opposite. It's regenerative. You can replant it and obviously reharvest from the same soil.
Exactly right. And we kind of do a very deep dive into all the different crops that farmers can grow, and we look at how much what is it, what energy do you need to put into this field to grow crops like wheat or canola or barley, what have you. And ahi flour is the lowest input crop of anything that our growers are growing in terms of it uses minimal fertilizers, minimal pesticides and herbicides. And it builds topsoil because it's in the ground for so long and it's still sending down deep roots. So we're looking at this kind of holistically around not only is it producing what we think is a phenomenal ingredient with great health benefits, it's also in its own way, you know, I visualize this as a virtuous circle of life. So if we can use regenerative agriculture, which we use regenerative agriculture to grow our crops, and we're producing ingredients that are regenerative to health, as you mentioned. Omega-3s are absolutely regenerative to our health, particularly in the area of inflammation management. And the consequence of doing that is that we're regenerating our oceans by taking the pressure off the sort of the extraction of fish. So it really is this sort of virtuous circle of life, and it kind of it just makes us really happy and proud to be operating that wheel, if you like.
I'd love to hear, Andrew, what are your biggest concerns with the current model of how we harvest fish oil? And what are some of your biggest concerns in the future if we continue to harvest fish oil in this way?
If we extract stuff now, whether it's fish or krill,
Mm-hmm.
we're taking stuff away from the food chain. And
Mm-hmm.
fish oil production over the last, gosh, I don't know the exact data to hand, but it's pretty much plateaued over the last, I think, I want to say 2 decades, and there'll be some seasonality to that, but we're pretty well at maximum fish oil because of either quotas or abundance or what have you. So if we want to grow the omega-3 market, we have to recognize it's not going to come from fish oil. The oceans just can't support that. And I think people are realizing that when people talk about sustainable catches, it's kind of like sustainable when? Is it sustainable today relative to the populations or sustainable 50 years ago, what have you? But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that the growth in that area is got to come from non-marine sources. And if it doesn't come from non-marine sources, we will be facing a really significant problem in our oceans by extracting that much biomass and life out of it. Because as it reached that level, generally accepted around the world, that we can't harvest anymore. So there's that element to your question about what are the concerns. The other ones are that, thinking about how important the oceans are, when we harvest stuff, the bycatch, I think I read that 40% of everything that gets caught in a net is not what we intended to catch. It's bycatch, it's turtles, it's whales, it's dolphins, it's species and they get discarded as dead, lifeless creatures. So it's an inefficient way of harvesting. It's indiscriminate. It's largely indiscriminate way of harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taking life out of the ocean that I think is better left in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the damage it's doing to the seabed in terms of releasing carbon dioxide and methane. That whichever way you look at it, whether it's the fact that it's not sustainable to harvest more fish, it's not okay to harvest bycatch, and it's not okay to release such large amounts of CO2 and methane and what have you. It feels like we have to look elsewhere for this solution. And, whilst I get fairly despondent about, what we're doing in certain parts of the world, I'm a tremendous optimist that we've solved some tremendously big problems as human beings, and we can solve this. This isn't rocket science. This is just thinking about, let's do the right thing.
How does ahi flour compare to other sources like flax or other algae derived sources?
So it's a great question. And at the macro level, I think whether you're fermenting algae, harvesting fish, growing flax, growing ahi flour, or chia, we're all aligned with we're trying to improve the omega-3 status of the planet. The difference comes when we look at what type of omega-3s are we trying to produce.
Hmm.
And fish oil and algal oil are producing almost exclusively EPA and DHA, these very long chain fatty acids that are highly researched, highly efficacious at managing inflammation. And most of the science has been done around EPA and DHA. What I would say is that the science behind taking preformed EPA and DHA is rapidly evolving. The science said humans are innately inefficient at converting plant-based omega-3s to EPA and DHA.
Hmm.
And that just didn't sit right. It doesn't make sense with anybody to say, well,
Yeah.
are we born with a defective gene or an inefficient conversion rate? And what about all these populations around the world that have never consumed EPA and DHA? How come they're
Right.
not showing deficiencies in their brain or
Right.
cardiovascular health, etc.? And the measurement for conversion efficiency was looking at how much our blood levels of EPA and DHA increased after consuming either, say, flaxseed oil or Ahiflower oil versus if we consume algal oil or fish oil.
Hmm.
So the conventional studies were around, Caroline, I'm going to get you to take fish oil for a month. I'm going to measure you on day 0, your blood levels of EPA and DHA, and I'm going to measure you again in 30 days. And Andrew, I'm going to put you on a course of Ahiflower, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And what the results will find is that, Caroline, your EPA and DHA levels went up much higher than Andrew's.
Hmm.
Therefore, Ahiflower isn't very good at raising EPA and DHA levels. That was a layman's distillation of the science.
Right.
What they're finding is, and what we've found to our research, is that if you look at the blood, that's exactly the results you'll get. But if you look at the
Hmm.
liver
Hmm.
and our whole body accrual of EPA and DHA, Ahiflower converts just as efficiently to
Hmm.
DHA as fish oil does.
Interesting.
That is a huge,
Yeah.
in my mind, that is a huge discovery that we have been drastically underestimating
Right.
the power of plant-based omega-3s for this conversion, because we've been looking at the blood alone. And now the work done by the University of Toronto is saying, if you look at the whole body,
Right.
it's 47 times more conversion efficient than the blood. 47 times. So I think this is shedding a light on the, and I hesitate to use the word equivalency, but I can't come up with a better word at the moment.
Yeah.
The equivalency and the complementarity, how complementary
Yeah.
plant-based omegas are and fish oil omegas are, that they'll get you to the same place for
Right.
whole body EPA and DHA accrual. And I think that's a huge discovery, and it's people starting to realize that makes more sense than just looking at a blood test to see how efficient we are at converting EPA and DHA.
I think it'd be really helpful just to explain on a more macro level as well. How did we get here where we are, so deficient in omega oils in our diets that we are putting this incredible demand, that's an incredible size category of, over $8 billion category on omega supplements.
Well, I'll tell you how I think we got here. Now there'll be a lot of people that disagree with this, but I'll tell you how I think we got here. So if we go back to pre-industrialized agriculture, omega-3 deficiency, I shouldn't say it wasn't a thing, but I don't think we were aware of omega-3 deficiency. And
Mm-hmm.
our diets are sort of, closer to our ancestral diets, our evolutionary diets were very much balanced in omega-3s and omega-6s, because we were hunter-gatherers. We ate fish, we ate offal, we ate eggs, we ate seeds and berries, etc. And throughout nature, generally, there's a balance between omega-3 and omega-6. And I would say that that was, pretty much where we came from. And it's what our body chemistry is pre-programmed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the early 1900s, when agriculture became industrialized, our food changed greatly. And as it relates to oils and fats, we industrialized oilseed production as a way of
Mhm.
producing a lot of calories. We produced, we were looking at, and the government policies were focused on producing energy per acre, not nutrients per acre.
Mhm.
So we were looking at a lot of sugars and a lot of fats. And those fats were largely from seed oils that are very rich in omega 6
Mhm.
and very light in omega 3s. And over a very short period of time, our diets, our background diets, went from having pretty much balance between omega 3s and omega 6s, slightly more omega 6, but pretty much balanced, to now what's reported as being 20 to 40 times more omega 6 than omega 3s. So, and omega 6s are typically pro inflammatory. Um, so, we had, there were two things that were, I think, we haven't done ourselves a great deal of favors with. The first one was that we increased our omega 6 consumption. The second thing is with the industrialization of agriculture. So if you think of crops like soybean oil, corn
Mhm.
oil, canola oil,
Mhm.
the, the big commodity crops, sunflower oil, they're almost devoid of omega 3s. It's not as if they've got a little
Mhm.
bit, they're almost devoid of omega 3s. But then as we started to industrialize these oils and we wanted ultra processed foods, we
Mhm.
wanted convenient foods, we wanted foods that didn't go off very quickly,
Mhm.
which extended shelf life. So through a case of plant breeding, what little omega 3s were left in the plants, they bred out. And they said, I don't
Mhm.
want any omega 3s because they are prone to oxidation, and
Mhm.
I want something that can sit on a shelf for months before it starts
Mhm.
tasting bad. And if you know what,
Yeah.
you're familiar with fish oil, if you leave it on fish on a shelf, you know what will happen. So as a result of that, I believe, and I think there's a general body of science evidence around this, that we have created a pro-inflammatory diet.
Mhm.
For not just because of the oils, but inflammation is kind of ubiquitous, and the ingredients that support inflammation are ubiquitous in ultra processed foods. So that, in my sort of layman's way of looking at this, Caroline, is I think how we got here. But there's
Mhm.
also another really important part to that. Omega 3s, there's no, I don't think there is any uh, controversy around the fact that when people say omega 3s are anti-inflammatory, we're deficient in them. Every cell in your body, every cell in my body needs them. They regulate hormones, they regulate our gut microbiome. They're in our brain, they're in our cardiovascular system. Nobody would argue that omega 3s are incredibly important for our diet. Yet, when we know this, why are we 80, 90% of us deficient in omega 3s?
Right.
When the evidence is there in front of us. And to my mind, the reason for that is that the only solution, the only real solution that has been proposed to date is fish oil.
Right.
And that is automatically exclusionary to a lot of people that either don't want to take it
Mhm.
or can't afford to buy a supplement every day,
Mhm.
or aren't going to sort of eat, salmon fillets and tuna fillets and that sort of thing. And it's sort of been the domain of the omega-3 industry has said, yeah, but unless it's fish oil or EPA and DHA, it's not going to work. It's not as efficient. And I think people have sort of gone, well, what do I do?
Mhm.
And that has exacerbated the situation because, you know, if fish oil production is finite and it has plateaued and we have this huge shortfall,
Mhm.
the gap has to be filled from somewhere. And I think that now there's enough evidence around this sort of science to say plant-based omegas. And of course, I think Ahiflower is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it absolutely is. Um, but flax is important, chia is important. A balanced diet of plant-based precursor omega-3s is important and very complementary to the EPA and DHA produced from fish oil and algal oil.
Do innovations like Ahiflower suffer from this social perception, right? The current health movement, this we'll call it never seed oil movement, kind of demonizes the seed oil on the label.
So going back to our conversation about the industrialization of agriculture and the prevalence of omega-3s and omega-6s in our diet, I think the argument against seed oils goes something along the lines of, and I don't know this for sure, but it goes along the lines of omega-6s are pro-inflammatory. Ultra-processed foods are using a lot of high omega-6 seed oils. They're ubiquitous. They consume large amounts of fertilizer. They're depleting the topsoil. They use Roundup or glyphosate in their manufacture. And really, when you look at all of these things, we should be mindful of reducing the use of industrial seed oils. And I
Mhm.
agree with that. I agree with that. But where the baby's been thrown out with the bathwater is that there wasn't a differentiation between industrial seed oils
Mhm.
and other seed oils. And it's like all seed now there's this sort of all seed oils are being tainted with the same brush.
Right.
And I look back at over my career, and if you look back through the history books, seed oils like flaxseed oil have been used for over 8,000 years, started in Egypt, spread around the world. So we've used seed oils, humans have used seed oils as sources of essential nutrients for thousands of years.
Mhm.
And I think they have contributed greatly to our balance of omega-3s and omega-6s.
Right.
Today, a lot of people still use them as their primary source of omega-3s.
Mhm.
And when they read about seed oils as being bad, I think that is doing a disservice, and it's
That's right.
potentially damaging to the industry when we turn around and say, yeah, but people are taking these seed oils to counter the effect, and it's a very effective way of countering the effect of high omega-6s. Look at Ahiflower, 10 times more omega-3 than omega-6. 10 times, it's the highest natural source of omega-3.
Mhm.
In all the trials we've done, we're seeing tremendous benefits, whether it is in the gut microbiome that you
Mhm.
mentioned, Caroline. Um, and to label that as a troubling oil seed for all the reasons I mentioned about growing regeneratively, biodiverse, nature's richest source of omega-3,
Mhm.
negligible amounts of omega-6, and to say that, yeah, but it's part of the seed oil family and therefore you should be concerned about it, I think is doing a disservice to health and nutrition and, and the consumer. And the problem is that, we all want to become experts after watching a 15-second TikTok interview now,
True.
right? Oh, yeah, I read
Yeah.
that. And that's
Yeah.
what happens. It starts as what might start out as a well thought through strategy becomes misinterpreted,
Right.
misrelayed, and misinformed. And I do think people need to be aware of that. And, you know, when people have that stark choice between, to your question, how does the seed oil industry sort of offset the fish oil component? Well, I don't want to take fish oil, but now I'm being told that seed oils are bad for me. I think it's about education, and we've just got
Mhm.
to turn. It's not all seed oils are not the same. And if instead of wanting a 15-second quick fix about saying it's seed oils, let's turn around and say it's industrial seed oils.
Right. So industrial seed oils, high in omega 6s, processed oils are incredibly inflammatory. And most consumers at this point understand inflammation, bad. Anti-inflammation, good. If you take an ahi flower, you're taking, these good balanced omegas, we say, okay, they're anti-inflammatory. What does that mean to someone that an omega oil is anti-inflammatory?
So inflammation is an essential part of our healing process, right?
Mhm.
Damage yourself, get an infection, you get hot, your body has inflammation. Omega 6s switch on inflammation,
Mhm.
omega 3s switch it off.
Hmm.
And so if you're in a pro inflammatory state, your body needs to calm that inflammation down, needs to switch that inflammation off. And omega-3s do that. They resolve inflammation. And if inflammation is left unchecked, it becomes chronic. And the I think I'm right in saying this, that inflammation is the root cause of more uh, health issues than just about anything else. And if you think some of those are obvious, joint health, arthritis, obviously around inflammation, um, allergies around inflammation, allergic reactions, asthma, skin conditions, root cause, often inflammation, cardiovascular health, root cause, inflammation, uh, diabetes, insulin sensitivity about inflammation. Inflammation and its control in our body is probably one of the most important things that the consumer needs to be mindful of and just be thinking, I need to lead an anti-inflammatory lifestyle.
That's right.
And by that, the two simple rules of thumb: consume less of the pro-inflammatory stuff and consume more of the anti-inflammatory stuff. And, I don't think there is a better anti-inflammatory nutritional strategy than boosting your omega-3 intake. It's like, so much study has been done around it in all of those conditions, whether it's inflammation of the joints, cardiovascular health, gut health, inflammation of the GI tract,
Yep.
hormonal balance. Omega-3s influence all of those metabolic functions.
So if someone were to take, an Ahiflower capsule or our hormone balance product with Ahiflower every day, Andrew, what does that do? So what are your studies that you've published around Ahiflower and inflammation showing us?
We look for key biomarkers that are telltale signs of inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things like interleukins and prostaglandins, what have you. But what we're measuring is how much does Ahiflower suppress the production of pro-inflammatory molecules, and it is very effective. And in nearly all the models that we've looked at, we've done, it is as effective as omega-3s from fish oil, and that's the key thing. It's as effective as fish oil at lowering key markers for inflammation. And if you lower the markers for inflammation, so all of this sounds great, it's very technical, but the consumer is like, well, so what? What does that mean for me?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to feel? Well, very simply, you're probably going to look better,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to feel better, and you're probably going to move better.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is, so the look better piece, particularly around hormonal function, is skin health. And
Right.
I attended a consumer show in the UK a couple of years ago, and we were giving away free samples of Ahiflower, like a 3-month supply. And the show was probably 90% women. And they were probably, I'm guessing, between early 20s and 60 in age group. There was some sort of outside that. But I'd say, look, what we're trying to do is we're trying to spread the word. We're trying to educate people. Would you, if we give you this, all I'm asking for in return is send me an email with what you found and how you did you like it? Did you, and the overriding response was, wow, this tastes a lot better than fish oil. I don't
That's
get
right.
any reflux and repeat burps. But the first thing they said is my skin changed. My I had a glow. I had just a really healthy complexion. People commented on it. The next thing I noticed is I felt better, and and feeling better is sometimes hard to put your finger on, but it was around
Right.
gut health, and it was around, yeah, this is actually having a benefit to me. And then some of them, not all of them, but some of them said, and particularly the older generation was saying, I actually noticed it with joint pain. I had less joint pain. So that's why we thought, again, omega-3s help you look well, move well, feel well. And to distill it down to what someone would expect to see from, again, it's look well, move well, feel well.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, connecting this back again to our products and the way that we've looked at the research with Ahiflower, omega oils play this incredibly powerful and often underappreciated role in gut health because one of the things that they do is we've talked about this, they lower the gut inflammation, but they also strengthen the gut barrier and help with microbial diversity. So all of that helps your immune response, etc. We say that ahi flower is the richest plant-based source of omega 3, 6, and 9. And we kind of, describe it as this perfect balance, right? This perfect plant-based balance. How would you describe that to a consumer who's just so fixated on, again, commercial seed oils and omega 6 bad? Where would they say, I don't want omega 6?
I'd go back to saying, your body is designed. It's a fantastic design, but it really needs omega 3s and omega 6s in balance. And
Yeah.
the likelihood is that it's very difficult to find because of the ultra processed foods, because of the proliferation of industrial oilseeds. It's very difficult to get that balance through an ordinary diet. You have
Right.
to you have to really go about saying, I need to boost my omega 3 intake because I can't reduce my omega 6 intake. It's everywhere. Um,
Mhm.
so, I would turn around and say, look for the richest sources of omega 3s,
Mhm.
because taking more omega 3s and omega 6s to get in balance isn't going to do you any harm. It's bringing it back into balance. So look for nature's richest source of omega 3, and also be discerning about what type of omega 3s are. Now, Ahiflower has a very unique type of omega 3 called
Mhm.
SDA. It's one of the few plants that has it. So not only is it the richest source of omega 3, it's also has the most sort of biologically available omega 3s.
Mhm.
And what we're finding is that what we did find is that Ahiflower will convert through to these sort of longer chain omega 3s about 400% more effectively
Mhm.
than flaxseed oil or chia seed oil. So, you know, as well as taking in more omega 3s, look for the ones that have this sort of superior metabolic conversion in them, and Ahiflower has that. So the simple message is boost your omega 3 intake and be mindful of your omega 6 intake.
I'd love to just get your take on everything that's going on in the US right now with the Maha movement, how this impacts, because it certainly impacts things we've been talking about.
So to be honest, I was a little bit skeptical to
Yeah.
start with about Maha, and I thought, oh God, it's another four-letter acronym that is designed to, elicit more of an emotive response maybe than a what have you. And so I thought, yeah, but I can't have an opinion unless I know what it's about. So I
Yeah.
dug into it, and I'm actually quite pleased about it, really. I think it's a great thing to shine a light on the status of America's nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think some of the findings that I read were startling,
Mm-hmm.
like you said about the deficiency in omega 3 is the fact. One statistic was that 75% of uh, 17 to 24-year-olds, I think it was, would be ineligible for military service because of either obesity or mental health, etc.
That's right. That's right.
Um, and the prevalence of obesity and all sorts of things. I would like to see the political environment of how we subsidize farmers to
Yeah.
change from subsidizing it to energy per acre to nutrients per acre.
That's right.
And I think there's ways of doing that. And I wouldn't leave it at just nutrients per acre, because we've been so effective at increasing output to feed the world after the Second World War. We had to boost production, and we did that very effectively. But the price that has now taken its toll on things like topsoil degradation,
That's right.
pollinator habitat, use of synthetics, the fact that we've all got glyphosate or in our
Yeah.
the GI tract, unfortunately, is all we're paying the price for it. And
That's right.
I think there's a way of saying, let's now go back to everything that we've talked about with health and wellness comes from producing better healthy ingredients. And I
Mhm.
think the fact that high fructose corn syrup is cheaper to produce than, say, a head of broccoli,
Yeah.
because of the subsidy and the sister around, is to my mind insane. We should be making it so it's more effective to produce nutrients per acre than calories per acre. So
It's a wonderful way to frame it. I hadn't heard of it framed that way, and I think to your point, from a kind of a legislative top-down perspective, it just makes a lot more sense. What does the regenerative agriculture landscape look like in America right now? And, what do you think that could look like in the future? Is there hope there, or is that really not a scalable model based on how we've set everything up?
I think it's definitely scalable, and I'm very optimistic about it. And the reason I'm so excited about regenerative agriculture is that, um, unlike organic agriculture,
Hmm.
it's not a pass or fail system. And I do want to, I'm not anti-organic. I'm not saying that organic is bad or anything. I'm a big supporter of organic farming. But for a farmer, your ranching friends, for example, to shift to organic production takes probably 3 years,
Hmm.
some investment, and some risk.
That's
To
right.
shift to regenerative agriculture, you can do it in one crop cycle, and it's not a pass or fail system. It's a
Yeah.
process of continuous improvement. And so it's a slower movement. It's a slower way of getting there, but it embraces. It's an inclusive way rather than an exclusive way
Yeah.
of
And
farming.
because this is one of the things that I think Maha could really get around. I mean, it just makes a
Absolutely.
lot of sense. It just, when you look at all the signs of what the movement of conversation and momentum, I think this is an area where Maha could get around. I think the struggle is the size, the breadth, the power of the USDA and the incentive structure that is currently in place. And that's where it's hard. But the regenerative agriculture is something I'm extremely optimistic about. And I think, you have to be, because if not, the alternative is that it's going to be total soil depletion, nutrient depletion. But again, I mean, the encouraging signs are that when you look at the spending and the willingness to spend right now for consumers on health and wellness and on better quality products, it's there. I mean, it's not going anywhere, and the younger generation is prioritizing it, which tells us that there's absolutely a demand and a momentum behind it.
No, working with farmers, when they talk in 10-year cycles and generation cycles about
Right.
investing in their farm and their soil, and they need the confidence to know that what they're doing today isn't going to be upended by the next administration, and that
That's
there's
right.
another change, and that something is going to change their economics. Tariffs obviously is one example that has
Hmm.
happened recently, but they need stability, and they need stability to know that, if I go down this route of regenerative agriculture and producing non-industrial commodity crops, there's going to be a framework for me that is going to go on for year after year after year, rather than saying, oh, everything stopped in 4 years' time, we're now going to go back to this.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be much more than, say, just a short term. This is what we're doing with this administration, and what's
Right.
going to happen with the next one. This just makes common sense for the health of American consumers, the health of American soil and farmland, and our biodiversity. It just makes sense on all of those fronts.
We obviously have Ahiflower, this amazing ingredient in all of our capsule products, so consumers can access Ahiflower through our capsules. What other forms, what other products? I mean, you guys have Ahiflower obviously in capsules, just like a fish oil, so kind of in a gel cap format, several different brands on the market, but you also have Ahiflower for horses, right? For a bunch of different categories now. So how can consumers access Ahiflower, and what are the forms that it's currently available in?
So yeah, well, and as you know, we love working with yourself, Caroline, and Nori, and your products are really, you are a groundbreaker by using ahi flour as a carrier oil for your probiotics, and I think the research that's now just coming out, which I do want to talk about, is now
Yeah,
showing just how much vision you had in that area to that.
we stuck with it, Andrew.
No, absolutely. And so there's obviously the very traditional way of taking ahi flour, which is in a soft gel capsule. And if you sort of Google or go to your local store, you'll find ahi flour as an ingredient there in soft gelatin capsules. We've developed other systems, a powdered oil with our friends and partners at a company called Core FX. and they make a great ingredient for it's a dispersible powder that can go into either powder products like shake mixes or
Mm.
drinks. It can go into an emulsion that then gets added to dairy products with our friends at Viren. So a few plugs
Cool.
there for our partners.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's not the exclusive domain of humans. We've got quite a few canine brands, quite a few equine brands in different parts of the world. So because all mammals need omega-3s, we're not we horses and dogs are suffering the same. They just don't tell us, but they're also their diets are probably going through similar
Yeah.
challenges as us. Too many high starch, high
Yeah.
caloric grains and not
Yeah.
enough of the omega-3s.
And then just kind of closing, would love to hear the latest research, anything else that you want to share that's, updates on this amazing ingredient and your business since the last time we spoke.
Well, there's two things that
Yeah.
the first one that I mentioned about, this sort of better understanding now that we shouldn't just look at blood as the proxy for how effective we are at metabolizing plant-based omega. So I've covered that. The other one is very, very on message with the gut health.
Yeah.
And as I say, when you decided to go down this route with Ahiflower, Caroline, I think you were visionary for seeing that the microbi the probiotics need to be carried in an oil medium,
That's right.
but not just any old oil.
Yep.
You've chosen an oil that has health benefits in of itself, which is great, and we've talked about the health benefits of Ahiflower, but they also have very specific benefits for the gut microbiome, and the consumer knowing that this combination of your microbiome products and Ahiflower is having a much bigger impact than either of them both on their own. They're kind of working in
Right.
symbiotically. And the research that's come out in the last few weeks is that um, Ahiflower acts as a prebiotic,
That's right.
and it's kind of, when I first read that, I thought this is going against conventional wisdom that prebiotics generally are non-digestible ingredients like fiber. But what we're finding is that Ahiflower and omega-3s, this isn't exclusive to Ahiflower, omega-3s have a beneficial effect on the gut microbiome population. So they're increasing the population of the anti-inflammatory guys and suppressing the population of the pro-inflammatory guys, and bringing the gut microbiome back into sort of, I guess you'd call it balance, or
That's
or
right.
a eubiosis, I think is the term. So we know that, but we also know that I'd mentioned earlier within Ahiflower, we have this fatty acid called stearodonic acid,
Yeah.
which is an omega-3. And we're finding that stearodonic acid has its unique benefits in the gut microbiome in terms of gut GI calming and
Yep.
anti-inflammatory properties. So really, you're the expert in the microbiome. I'm not, so I'm in grave danger of going beyond my skis
No,
with this.
you're great. You're getting it all. All of
We,
this is
what,
accurate.
what we're learning is that we've got to feed the guys in our gut more than think about feeding ourselves, and they are as sensitive to omega-3s and omega-6s as we are in that balance. And with the right omega-3s, you're getting greater survival of the microbiome of the probiotics going through the gut. So you're getting
Yep.
a greater delivery to where they're being used. You're enhancing the population of the right ones, so you're getting a better balance there, and you're uh, positively affecting how the microbiome then performs as it relates to producing anti-inflammatory metabolites and hormonal regulation. So
Yeah.
all of these things are working together, and I love the story of how your range of products using Ahiflower really is delivering that sort of symbiotic relationship that is certainly the sum of the parts is greater than their individual parts.
That's exactly right. And when I started working on the business and started to read research, that's what I was going for. And I had never had any intentions to get into the supplement category, to be quite frank. But I was very captivated by the gut microbiome, and I knew that this was the foundation of human health, and saw a really big opportunity to come out with a brand that was incremental and doing things that were new and innovative, but also approachable, right? And that's the kind of tension that we live in every day. We want a brand that can approach anyone,
Yeah.
with price point, with quality, with kindness, with accessibility, all of those things, but also simultaneously a brand that is sharp with our science and our research and our innovation. And I think we've done a great job with that, and we'll just continue to do a great job. And so thank you for your partnership. And I know this conversation podcast is going to be a great resource to a lot of people, but I appreciate, all your hard work. And this goes unrecognized, I think, a lot of the times, but people like you that lead these companies have been doing this for decades, right? And you've been focused on this and haven't given up, and have just continued to trust what you know to be true, and continue to work on the research and show the consumers more and more the power of this. So